As much as it was a truly awe-inspiring moment to have Vaas from Far Cry 3 taunt you as you scratched and clawed your way towards him, or how Handsome Jack bantered you off constantly in Borderlands 2, there's something to be said about those who speak with their actions and not with their words. Now, the concept of a silent protagonist is something that we're pretty used to by now in video games, and it's a very clever development tool to get audiences to invest in their characters and see themselves as these forces for good within their games. And yet, when it comes to villains, more often than not, you'll find countless examples of Machiavellian mischief makers spouting off reams of dialogue in order to coax you towards killing them. However, the examples on this list are as silent as the grave and will bloody well put you in one. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game villains that don't say a word. Number 10. Yami Okami. The yin to Amateratsu's yang, Yami was a dark god and the incarnation of all that is evil, just as Amaterasu was to all that is good. It's appropriate then that neither of these all-powerful deities was capable of speaking or communicating much in any way. I'm sure that the do-good doggo might have been able to use that magic brush to let us know that Timmy was indeed in that well, but in Yami's case it didn't need to say a thing, letting its actions speak volumes. Yami was responsible for the darkness spreading all over Nippon, pulling the strings of many of the demon lords that you faced along your journey, which is pretty impressive for a big fish in what is essentially a giant armoured fishbowl. And yes, I know that I've just put him over as the big bad, but Yami is basically just Bob the Killer Goldfish from Earthworm Jim. I hope that hasn't ruined it for you. So yeah, just remember, though capable of changing form from a mini Death Star to a giant hand to a full-blown mecha suit and being the incarnation of death, decay and malevolence, he was also just a fish in a bowl. Still though, he didn't say a word, and I'll say no more about it. Number 9. Advisors, Half-Life 2. These are some ugly sons of guns, aren't they? And if you've played the Half-Life series, you'll know to hate these horrible creatures for what they did to your favourite characters. The Advisors are the ruling species of the pan-dimensional empire known as the Combine, giant squishy grubs with breathing masks and baby robot arms. They appear physically helpless for most of the games, and we mostly see them doling out orders via their version of FaceTime, and the first thing that they do at the end of Half-Life 2 is flee in their life support pods. So you think to yourself, they're not much of a threat, right? Wrong. While we surmise that the Advisors can communicate to their subordinates, it's implied that their communication is entirely psychic, making it impossible for Gordon and Alex to predict their intentions. And these things are much more durable than you might have first thought, as during the events of Episode 2, Gordon and Alex come face to face with an Advisor and assume that killing it would be as easy as destroying its life support. But this simply angers it, and the closest that the Advisor comes to communication is via something not unlike a whale call, but it's completely unintelligible to our heroes. It's the stabbing of Eli through the back of the head that actually delivers a message much louder than we could have anticipated. Number 8. Big Daddies, Bioshock. While not technically villains, as they have no villainous motives other than to protect at all costs, the Big Daddies can make for a frightening foe if you mess with their little sisters. They were once just men, put through a gruesome process to create the perfect bodyguards for the little sisters, who themselves are young girls put through an equally horrible transformation. Together, the two lumber and prance respectively through rapture, harvesting precious Adam from dead bodies. When provoked, the Big Daddies come at you like a linebacker, crushing through anything in their path to stab you with a drill that I can tell you has not been cleaned in a while, so the likelihood of getting tetanus from this is huge. Also, your insides will probably be jam at that point. While far from being quiet, what with all the smashing of things and people, the Big Daddies are, by design, completely mute aside from a guttural groaning. This is meant to be a special language that they use to communicate, but in actuality it's just the result of the subject's vocal cords being shredded in order to prevent them from warning the little sisters of what they are doing. Honestly, it's a horrible sounding existence, but such is normality in Rapture, I'm afraid. Number 7. Darth Nihilus, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. One of the trio of Sith who nearly succeeded in wiping out the Jedi prior to the events of the game, Darth Nihilus remained a looming, mysterious spectre right to the very end. After the final confrontation with him, Darth Nihilus' former abused apprentice removes his mask to reveal that all along he was just a man. But while he might have had the body of the human Jedi that he once was, Nihilus clearly became something altogether different. Nihilus sustained himself by feeding on Force energy, eventually becoming what can only be described as a black hole, wandering the galaxy, draining entire planets of all life to feed his hunger. And though he was capable of communicating with the Jedi Exile and their party, his air-quote speech is more of a form of vague telepathic signals that are never translated to the player. To them, Nihilus is no more or less than a force of nature, or like an animal feeding. However, unlike munching on leftover Big Macs in your bins, this animal threatens all life whenever he passes. Number 6. Lavos, Chrono Trigger. Somewhat like Nihilus, Lavos is a parasite that exists only to feed. Crashing to the Earth in the Stone Age, Lavos lay mostly dormant, guiding the evolution of life so it could one day emerge to feed. Then it would reproduce, die, and then its offspring would continue its cycle across other worlds. Pretty charming, right? Kind of like a giant Lovecraftian tick who made and then will eventually eat humanity. Though Lavos itself never communicates in any apparent way, the game's secondary antagonist, Queen Zeal, seems to be able to communicate and understand the creature, but the player is never given any glimpse of these dialogues. At the very least, it was capable of following her commands. But whatever its level of awareness, its mere presence led to a series of events that caused the mass extinction of the reptite race, the introduction of magic to the world, the complete obliteration of the Kingdom of Zeal, a devastating war between humans and non-humans, and ultimately the desolation of the entire planet. And those are just the bullet points, which is pretty impressive for what amounts to be just a big old bug. Number 5. Tyrant / Mr. X, Resident Evil 2. First encountered as the boss of the original Resident Evil, the original Tyrant was, as most things are in Resident Evil, easily felled by a direct blast from a rocket launcher. The Tyrant that appeared in Resi 2, aka Mr. X, however, was made of much tougher stuff. Mr. X was a super weapon created by Umbrella Corporation for two specific purposes: retrieve the G-Virus and kill all witnesses to Umbrella's most recent zombie-related disaster. And so this silent behemoth was released unto the world. And silence was actually a tactical approach, because why would Umbrella want anyone to know their intentions? Though slow and Jason-like in his stride, Mr. X always found a way to end up right in your path, and trust me, that is the last thing you want when you've already been contending with zombies, dogs, IVs, and horrible G mutations. Take your papier-mâché face somewhere else, mate. Number 4. Ridley, Metroid series. It's easy to forget sometimes that this screeching dragon man is actually the military leader of the Space Pirate, a species of aliens that have been hounding bounty hunter Samus around since the beginning of her career. Ridley's schemes usually revolve around the capture and reproduction of the Metroids, a powerful parasitic alien race sought after for their application as bioweapons. And I say this like I actually speak screeching parrot demon, because it's never actually revealed how Ridley communicates this to his crew. In fact, there's actually a humorous image of him squawking away and then flying off, and then the rest of his army just shrugging and following along, not having a clue what he was on about. I mean, they seem to love Ridley though, because they keep him alive at nearly any cost, so maybe he's actually a brilliant leader and we're too stupid to understand it. Number 3. Calamity Ganon, The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. Once a Gerudo king named Ganondorf, this big bad lad was said to be quite the chatterbox in his human form, always going on about fate this, darkness that, world domination, blah blah blah. And even when he was a pig man, he was running his mouth all the time. However, by the time of Breath of the Wild, in this post-apocalyptic Hyrule, it seems that pretty much all that was left of the Gerudo King is long gone. Instead, all that remains is an essence of destruction. It is an entity that has no motive other than to lash out and destroy everything. It took a century tethered to Hyrule Castle in a battle of wills against Princess Zelda before Link could gain the power to defeat it and seal its evil once more. However, the teaser trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 could indicate that his physical body is no longer content to stay dead and may resume its villainous monologuing in games to come. Number 2. Lord Gwyn, Dark Souls. The world of Dark Souls is a sad and eerily silent place, mostly populated by mindless undead, and at the centre of this dying world is Gwyn, once crowned the Lord of Sunlight. Gwyn is primarily responsible for just about everything in the world of Dark Souls. Rallying his knights and the combined power of 3 other lords, Gwyn took away the power from the everlasting dragons and ushered in the Age of Fire. Eventually, however, the flames of the Age of Fire grew dim, and as the last remaining lord, Gwyn sacrificed himself to keep the kiln of the first flame burning, thus prolonging his Age of Fire. But in doing so, he only succeeded in prolonging its slow, agonizing decay, and over time his legacy has devolved into legends. And this means that other characters fill you in on his story, so much so that when you actually come to face Gwyn, he never has to say a word, just as it should be. And number 1, Pyramid Head, Silent Hill 2. Oh boy, where to begin with this piece of work? Pyramid Head, like all the monsters that protagonist James encounters in Silent Hill 2, is but a projection of his psyche. Old Trapezoid Top is a boss who repeatedly emerges to attack James throughout Silent Hill 2 and can first be seen sexually assaulting other Silent Hill monsters. Yeah, he's a proper wrong'un. It turns out that Pyramid Head is James's guilt over the murder of his terminally ill wife, and all of the resentment and sexual frustration that he felt over the course of her long deterioration. Feeling a subconscious desire to punish himself for his actions and feelings, James creates Pyramid Head. This manifestation is a silent, invincible boss who doesn't need to say anything in order to torment James, and it's pretty much the perfect horror monster as a result. And there we go, those were 10 video game villains that don't say a word. I hope that you enjoyed that, my friends, and please let me know what you would have put on this list down in the comments section below. But before I go, I would like to say a few words. We spoke today about video game villains who were able to torment the player without saying a word, and of situations where negativity was born out of silence. And I just want to make sure that if you are experiencing negativity in your life, be it emotional or physical, that you know that you do not need to stay silent about that. You can reach out and speak to people, because you'll be so surprised at how much people actually care about you. I know that sometimes it can feel like you are alone, that you are adrift from the rest of society, but I promise you, friends, family, professionals in the support industry, there are numerous avenues for you to reach out and speak to people about problems that you have going on. No one should rebuff you for those things. No one should make you feel bad for them, because all, at the end of the day, just want you to do well and be happy. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. As always, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.